The man who murdered my baby sat in a concrete room, wearing the same heavy hoodie and black stretch pants as he had that day. I would have pulled my computer off the desk and thrown it across the room if the shock of seeing his hideous face hadn't numbed me into a state of borderline paralysis. After fiddling with the camera, the hooded man leaned back and stared intently into the lens. "I'm so sorry, Jeremy," he said in a low, gruff voice, causing sharp chills to race down my spine when he spoke my name. "I really am so very sorry for everything, but you must understand why this happened. Let me start from the beginning." I took a sharp breath and struggled to maintain my composure, but felt compelled to continue watching. "My name obviously isn't Mr. Doe. It's Eric, and I'm from the year 2076. I know that sounds absurd, but you have something that will prove I'm telling the truth, which I'll cover in a little bit." The man, who identified himself as Eric, leaned closer towards the camera. "You know this was for a greater good, and doing this actually saved countless lives." I leaned back and stared skeptically at the computer screen, my intensifying hatred for this man clashing with the queasy uneasiness ushered in when he admitted to being the Mr. Doe from whom I received the package. "Okay, now that I've got your attention, here's where it gets complicated," Eric continued. "Some years from now, I can't get into specifics, a catastrophe is going to occur that devastates the world. Among the most adverse ramifications are a series of physical mutations that a portion of the population will undergo. As you can clearly see," Eric gestured toward his deformed face, "were known as defects and require special treatment to stay alive, like routine radiation doses and staying within certain temperature ranges, just to mention a few. Cases of radiation contamination and new disease outbreak originating from defects turn us into pariahs. This is where your son comes in. During these times, we call Ashton Williams the Damron. He was a renowned public figure, whose faction quickly rose to power in the Cataclysm's aftermath, feeding off people's manipulatable emotions and fear. Seeking a scapegoat amidst their promise of rebuilding, the Damron, as his minions are called, set their sights on the defects. They succeeded in generating enough widespread hatred amongst us, even going so far as to stage violent attacks and pinning us as the culprits. The video made me completely enraged. The Damron cited their attacks and our susceptibility to infect and contaminate people as grounds to start rounding us up into containment camps. We knew the risks we posed towards unaffected portion of the population and took great pains to isolate and care for ourselves. While researchers worked tirelessly to discover a cure, they actually came close, but the programs were discontinued without explanation. The camps had inhumane conditions. Many died from disease or malnourishment before the Damron began extermination. The things they did would make history's most heinous figures cringe. You'll see what I mean when you watch the other files. I lost everything in those camps, Jeremy. Doing this was the only way to reverse that, and in the end, the Damron's oppressive reign. I felt a lump form in my throat and held back tears, simultaneously empathizing with Eric, while still reluctant to believe his stories. Your son was ravenous for power. The Damron's evasively occupied territory, eventually starting a multinational war. They killed millions of defects, but those numbers pale in comparison to the tens of thousands of people who perished just in the war alone. A few tears streamed down Eric's face as he spoke. It's okay to talk about what your son would have become, since that timeline is being eliminated. As for why I killed him in such a gruesome manner, doing it at that exact moment and way was the only option to stably alter the timeline. My heart sank when I recalled that fateful day, particularly when the tree limb fell on my car. It was the perfect distraction. Did Eric know that would happen? Did he change time to make that branch break, knowing how immediately it would occupy my attention? Jeremy, I know you're probably having a hard time believing this. I would too, but think about how I just vanished from my cell. I'd love to explain how it works, but it's against the rules to directly reveal certain information. That's why I sent you this. There's clues for events that will occur in the future, which will verify this is very real. Think of it as a puzzle. It's actually quite easy once you figure it out. There's some considerable time between each instance, but don't worry, I'll send you reminders. I know you're hurt, confused, and angry right now, but please believe me when I say a great loss or tragedy is sometimes necessary to prevent something much, much worse from happening. After the video ended, I stared at the computer for what felt like hours. Tearing, perspiring, and trembling, I had no idea what to believe. After collecting myself, I watched the other videos, which were compilations of newspaper clippings, excerpts from news broadcasts, and raw footage depicting scenes of war and unfathomable carnage. They seemed to map out everything Eric described, mentioning the cataclysm, the defects, the Demache rise to power, and their imperialistic campaign. Headlines such as, "Experts, recovery will take years," "Over 10K new mutation cases confirmed," "Link between defects and contamination outbreak identified," and "Demache completes southern coastal occupation," caught my eye, while videos and pictures flashed on the screen that Eric's words did little justice in describing. I saw images of war-torn horizons and crumbling city skylines, explosions, scores of marching fighting soldiers, along with dead and dismembered bodies. The most disturbing scene showed defects performing hard labor, rooms with their bodies and severed limbs hanging from meat hooks, mass executions and graves, even some getting their deformities cut off or experimented on while they were still conscious. It didn't take long for me to deduce a robust, prominent-looking man donning black authoritative uniforms and a long overcoat, who I saw clips of making fiery speeches, getting paraded around while waving to the crowd, speaking with officers, other official-looking individuals, and transported by armed security detail. It was my son. Despite having his mother's eyes, Ashton bore an overwhelmingly striking resemblance to me. But what verified my son's identity without a shadow of a doubt was the birthmark still visible beneath his left eye. Despite the macabre prospects of the future, I was intensely proud of my son, which I suppose comes natural for any parent, until reminding myself that he would have turned into a genocidal warlord whose totalitarian regime appeared to deepen the world's state of ruin. I stopped watching after one scene of Ashton making a passionate speech when I noticed an elderly man and woman sitting in the background. They were huddled together and gazed upon Ashton, their faces containing conflicted expressions of admiration and obligatory supportiveness, along with disappointment, concern, and dismay. My jaw dropped, and I released a gasp-like yelp before abruptly closing the video. Rachel and I were that elderly couple. Experiencing a wave of smothering lightheadedness, I tried pouring myself a drink, only to violently regurgitate it while standing over the sink. Those videos looked so genuine, and I hated how everything Eric said was making sense. Had my son really been destined to become this monstrous tyrant? Was this some elaborate sadistic prank a deranged individual was orchestrating to gain pleasure at the expense of my suffering? I tried thinking of every conceivable explanation to not believe, but I couldn't be convinced. My attention shifted to the notes, series of numbers that meant nothing upon review. Remembering what Eric said, to think of it as a puzzle, I looked at the first set of characters. 9, 112, 1, 11, 77 175 93. What are you trying to tell me? I asked. This must be something more to this. About 1 week later, I received an identical light gray envelope in the mail. It contained a handwritten letter, also in red ink, that simply read 9112001, just reminding you. I spent weeks trying to crack the cryptic code, which consumed me for months to no avail. It would take me over 3 years to finally figure it out when the next letter arrived. After finalizing my divorce with Rachel, I moved back to my home state and reconnected with an old high school sweetheart. We got engaged, were starting our own company, and in the process of purchasing a house. I was grateful to finally move on with my life, but despite getting closure on Ashton's death, I still kept the indecipherable letters. Christmas was 5 days away, and I returned home from gift shopping where I found another light gray envelope lying on my doormat. Despite immediately knowing what it was, the envelope's mere sight flooded my mind with memories of Ashton's screams, his burning carriage, and Eric's undeniable face. I shakingly opened the envelope to find another letter, which read, 12-262-004. Do you believe me yet? On the first letter, written 12-262-004, were the numbers 75891. This time around, however, I was more concerned Eric knew where I lived than solving this mystery. I was about to dial 911, but remembered when Eric said that he was sending me reminders and decided to play along, feeling certain this letter was the latest. I figured everything out on the date later, ironically while writing a final check to my divorce lawyer. It was the day after Christmas, and I had the news on while paying some bills. They were talking about a massive earthquake and tsunami that devastated coastal communities around the Indian Ocean. I was so distracted by the story, I almost put the comma of the check's numerical amount in the wrong spot. While stopping myself, I looked at the check's date, which read December 26th, 2004. Remembering I was anticipating something significant to happen, I grabbed the open letter and stared closely at the numbers. 12-262-004. Thinking about the mistake I almost made on the check, I rewrote the figure and shifted the second comma 1 digit to the left, so it read 12-26-2004. I did the same with the top number, going from 9112001 to 9/11/2001, which was when it became clear. They were dates. It was something the news anchor said that I happened to hear. The earthquake registered a 9.1 on the Richter scale. That drew my stare to the number beneath, 12-26-2004, which were 758 and 91. Then it came to me. 9-1 signified the earthquake's magnitude. I learned the quake happened at 7:58 a.m. local time, which I linked to the other number, 758. Solving 9112001 figures was even more unsettling. The date it translated to was obvious, and after doing some research, I deduced the other figures represented the first number of each aircraft involved. I started shaking when the reality of the revelation hit me, almost having a serious breakdown when I couldn't fathom any other way that Eric or whoever it was could have known this information. My perception of reality, space, and time was turning upside down, marking a day which forever changed my life. I still resent Eric for killing my baby, and I will always keep Ashton's memory alive, because I remember him as an adorable, innocent child who hadn't hurt or wronged a single soul. Having said that, I finally understand what Eric meant. I translated the last 3 numbers, 34-2-0112, became March 4th, 2012. 842-020 turned into August 4th, 2020, and 4-132-029 was April 13th, 2029. Despite the tragic nature of the events that already happened, I understood why Eric chose them specifically. They mostly happened by pure chance and could not have been predicted or prevented. Having said that, I've spent the last 15 years making vain efforts at determining what happens on each of those dates before the event unfolds, with hopes of preventing the tragedy. As expected, I received my next letter over 7 years later in a late winter of 2012. 342-012. I know you don't need the reminders anymore, but I sent this one just in case, was what it read. Under 342-012 on the original letter, I received over a decade ago, 700 UTC and capital were written. On March 4th, 2012, a series of deadly explosions caused by an arms dump rocked Brazzaville, capital city of the Republic of the Congo. The blast started around 8 a.m. local time, which translated to 7 o'clock Coordinated Universal Time, otherwise known as UTC. That made sense. The most recent event happened this past summer. The next letter arrived the last week of July, which said 842-020. See you soon. Don't do anything stupid. I'll be watching. I obsessed over this and what it might mean, unsure how it pertained to the next event I expected to occur on August 4th. Beneath 842-020 on the original letter were the terms NH4903 and port, whose meaning I could only speculate until the actual event transpired. I'm sure most of us remember the explosion that happened in Beirut, Lebanon. Port signified where the blast happened, a port in Beirut. This one took me a while, but I figured out NH4NO3 was the chemical formula for ammonium nitrate, which caused the deadly explosion. There's a good amount of time between now and the last event, which should be on April 13th, 2029. After translating it from a numerical figure of 4132029, beneath it on the original letter, that I still have after all these years, the phrase 1997 XF11 and skin are written. I have no idea what they foreshadowed, and I probably won't know until the actual day. I've kept this knowledge of the future away from my then fiancée, who's my now wife of 14 years. We have a thriving company under us, along with a home and 2 beautiful children. The letters and their connection to Ashton's death are tied to a completely different part of my past that my family was not involved in and has no knowledge of, and I intend to keep it that way, until we met our new neighbor. They were a very nice couple from the Northwest that relocated for the husband, Corey's job. They have 1 child who's around the same age as my own kids, and they get along famously, along with a 2-month-old baby boy. Looking back, I think I understand now what the most recent letter I received meant. The name of my neighbor's newborn is Eric. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. If you haven't already, I always suggest hit that subscribe button, maybe go ahead and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the great stories that we do here. I've got a link below to my latest book if you'd like to pick up your own copy. Follow the link below down to Amazon, and if you'd prefer a signed one, get up with me. I'm sure we can work something out. If you'd like to support the show in a more monetary way, might I suggest heading on down to Patreon. We have several tiers. I'm sure you'll find something that'll suit you. I always recommend my $10 tier, which is my Ghostly Reader tier. You get a signed copy of my book on your doorstep anytime I write one, which is, on average, about twice a year. Speaking of my awesome patrons, let's go ahead and thank them, shall we? Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor, and thanks to Winter, Xaronan, Emily Coltsfoot, Stephanie Carrington, Marianne Schuler, Jennifer Damron, and Tyler Parker for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.